Hi, this is David Rice. I have the Substack Hit Christian, and I'm here with Pam Buttram. She is going to be talking to us about SB727 and some of the tax code. I'm also here with Gretchen Garrity. She has a blog, Right to Win Ozarks, and she is a fantastic interviewer and journalist. And she's giving me a face like she's not, but I wanted to say something nice about her. So we're all going to be talking about this issue. It's a school choice bill, or it's being advertised as a school choice bill. Everyone is telling us that this will make it easier for us to lower or decrease the power that DESE has. So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education will no longer have as much power in the state because of this bill. That's what they're saying. DESE will somehow wither away and die on the vine because of this bill. They're also saying that homeschool parents are now being protected better, that they have more choices, that there'll be more money for them to provide curriculum for their children, that there'll be more money for private schools. However, we want to kind of dig into the tax code and see what's going on. So Pam, tell us a little bit about yourself, why you are interested in this bill.
Okay. I'm a retired attorney and my background is in tax. I studied tax when I went to law school. And so this just caught my eye. And when I really started digging into it, I realized this is a tax bill. And this is something that was written by tax lawyers, very competent tax lawyers. And so, I wasn't buying into the choice narrative at all. And the more I researched it, the more I saw that it's a takeover of the public education, and they're privatizing it, and there's big money that's behind this, and the people are being sold a bill of goods. And then I also, as I was really carefully analyzing the existing statute before we even get to SB 727, I realized that there's a fund that's been created in here, like an endowment, and that all of the money that's being put into this is not actually going to the students. It's more that the earnings on the fund are going to the students. So anyway.
So the interest that's being earned on the fund, like capital interest?
No, it would be more like dividends and interest.
Dividends and interest, okay.
If you have capital gains, that's considered principal, and that would go back into the fund.
Okay.
So if you want to, I can go through the existing statute that they passed in 2021
Yeah.
and kind of step through how it's laid out.
We would really like that, because when we read it, we knew that we were over our heads. We did our best to analyze it, but we really appreciate you being able to come in with an expert opinion and really dig into it. So go ahead.
Well, don't feel bad about it. Most attorneys don't study tax law at all.
Yeah.
And I've been out of it for 30 years as far as actively practicing, but I had to really study this thing. And when I started looking at it from a tax standpoint, it all made sense. And I could see it. I guess I want to first start out talking about how they passed this bill, because people, it's theater up there. And the sponsors, when they sponsor a bill, they're not the guys that write it. So you had Krista Finelli sponsoring it in the House, and I heard him on a podcast saying that he was an activist attorney. So this is not a tax guy that can write tax law. And then you've got Andrew Koenig in the Senate, who sponsored it. He's a drywall contractor. Yeah. How could he possibly?
Well, it's 167 pages.
Right.
I mean, the second bill, not the first bill. I don't know how long the 2021 bill is, but this bill is 167 pages, and it's dense.
It is.
It's hard to read.
Right. And I can tell you just from watching how this whole thing rolled out, with the people involved in it, with their connections to ALEC and different things like that, this bill...
ALEC is American Legal Exchange Commission?
Council,
sorry. Right. Council set up by Rex Sinekfield?
I don't know if he set it up. It's been around for a long time. Charles Koch is probably the leading person in it, and he's very much about privatizing education. But it's an organization of the big corporations, and they write legislation that they want.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a special interest group of the big guys.
Yeah, they've been pushing for privatization of education for a long time, not just here in Missouri, but in other states. And some of their endeavors have really hurt education.
I think so too. And we'll get more into that, I guess, but I agree. I think going from public education to government funded private education is a huge mistake because number one, the Constitution doesn't apply to private entities, and so parents' rights, children's rights, they're all on the table now.
Well, data collection, constant data collection. Children are no longer private individuals, but they are products.
Yeah. And the other thing that I've noticed is when they do these public-private partnerships, you cannot do sunshine requests because of these private organizations. So they're working in concert with government, and they're hiding everything that they're doing based on their privacy, laws.
Yeah, they're using the power of government to compel you to go to school, but they're using the private, you can't touch us or find out what we're doing because we're private.
Yeah, that libertarian mentality that a private entity, a private institution can do whatever it wants and no one can say anything about it.
Yep. This is fascism. Private, I think you said it last time, private public is fascism.
Yeah,
it really
creates a nationalized institution that the government will always feed money into and direct, and then there's people who privately make money off of that forever.
Right. Yeah. It's not a good thing for us, that's for sure.
Well, in January, ALEC announced the launch of the Education Freedom Alliance, and it is literally a consortium of numerous organizations, including the Heritage Foundation, including Americans for Prosperity, and all the other usual libertarian, quote, somewhat conservative groups, but these are not in it for us.
No, and that Americans for Prosperity is Charles Koch.
Yeah.
And they've really been pushing the line, I think, as far as being a 501c3 and pushing for bills.
They were having our reps come to the VFW here, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. So they came here and they made it a private event so that journalists couldn't come and record or take notes. And so they put it fine print. And then when we called them out for it, they called us liars. And then we showed the receipts, and then they
went away.
They called us liars for other reasons. Every time we showed receipts, they found a different reason to call us liars.
Well, good for you for calling them out.
But yeah, so they're privatizing an event with our reps, so freedom of speech no longer applies.
Yeah.
Freedom of press goes away.
Yeah.
So go on.
Okay. Well, with 727 that was just enacted. That bill came in maybe at 12 pages to start with, but then it ballooned into this huge thing. Well, I can tell you the way this happened, that huge thing was always there. And they staged getting it through. They introduced it. But when they put on the show of, Koenig, somebody said to me, Koenig went and he cobbled together this huge bill. Andrew Koenig does not have the skill to do that. These legislators are not up there till the crack of dawn writing bills. They just are not doing it. And you can tell from this thing in 2021 when they passed the Empowerment Scholarship Act, this is not something they have the capability to do. No. So this whole thing was staged to where it looks like, we have bipartisan support for this. This is choice. It's just a big charade. The whole bill was written ahead of time, and it was in increments brought to the public's attention. But for Lauren Arthur to say in session to Koenig, she said, well, we didn't get everything we wanted, but, this is a pretty good bill.
What else do they want out of 167 pages?
Right. Who gives them their talking points? And so, people really need to understand the legislature is not up there writing bills. They're not even really negotiating them.
And you're correct when you said it's theater. And it's very obvious if you spend any time at all in Jefferson City that you're not dealing with people who actually have any power.
Right. They don't. And, I think that some people the educators probably got surprised on this, because for years and years, I think they've had a lot of impact or influence up there, because the education bill or the education budget, I think I was told it's 80% of our state.
Well, it's $10 billion, and $50 billion is this whole state budget. So last year,
Okay.
so it's, what is that, 1/5?
20%.
20%. And so the larger your budget is, the more power you have in Jeff City. And so you try to increase it. And then they're bringing in federal dollars. They have another about $1.5 billion. Dr. Byrne has said, Dr. Mary Byrne. And so they're really running around an almost $11.5 billion, $12 billion budget, plus the increase for things like this. Even though it's only a $25 million increase, they know long term this is a $500 million project, a $1 billion project.
Yeah.
Because they want to privatize.
Yeah.
Sorry, they want to privatize private education, so that all private schools fall under DESE, and that's their goal.
So is it any surprise that there's outside money interest that want a piece of our, of that big budget?
Yeah.
And so, I do think that this is just my guess, but I would think that the superintendents, the teachers associations, I think all of them were probably surprised that they couldn't stop this thing. And there was a good fight for it, only passed by one vote in the House. But, I don't think they realize yet that they're being taken over by the private interests.
DESE wanted this to pass, which is why it passed.
You betcha. They get a lot of control through this. Well,
go ahead.
Should I go ahead and start on this then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we're talking about the bill that was passed in 2021, and you'll remember all of us were kind of busy right then because we had the COVID scare, and we had the lockdowns, and we had our families in the hospitals that were being killed because of the protocols. So we're all real busy, and they passed this, the Missouri Empowerment Scholarship Program, which is section 135.712 to 135.719, and also associated with that is section 166.700 to 166.720. But today I'm really going to focus a lot on section 135.712 and the following sections, to talk about where this secret money, where the money's going. So I'll just start out at the beginning, going through 135.712. We have the statement of what a qualifying contribution to the Empowerment Scholarship account would be, and that's cash, stocks, bonds, or other marketable securities. Okay, so a taxpayer, a donator, a contributor could donate cash, stocks, bonds, or other marketable securities. So that's really important because those are things that are readily available for value. You just look in the Wall Street Journal, the stock market.
So they're easily transferable.
And easily, if I give you a stock, if I contribute a stock to this program, then it's easy to identify what the value of that gift is on that certain day. Okay, so who is eligible to make donations to this? I'm just going to call it program to keep it short, but it's a scholarship program. Okay, it has to be a taxpayer. Somebody that is subject to Missouri tax can donate stocks, bonds, cash, marketable securities to the program. So these people that can donate it would be individuals, firms, corporations, partnerships, and people in those. So big corporations.
Isn't there a limit to how much money can be donated to get the tax credit?
Nope. No, there's no limit. 100% of the donation is returned in tax credits. Now,
explain that for the layperson who might not get what that means.
Okay, so if I donate to this program, 100% of that donation is returned to me through a tax credit. And what that tax credit does, it offsets your other taxes. And so what you would have paid in taxes, you're getting back in a credit. So basically, it doesn't cost me anything to donate. And I know what you're thinking about limits. It says it it's limited to half of your tax burden.
Yeah.
Well, okay, if I donate, let's keep it easy. If I owe the government $100 and I donate $50 to this, then I get a tax credit for $50. If I were to donate more than the 100, then over 4 years I could get a credit against taxes in the next 4 years credit. So just to keep it simple, it really is 100% deductible.
Okay.
And anybody that would make a donation to this, or any corporation that would make a donation to this, would plan it, you know.
So what about the $75 million? Once that $75 million cap is reached, does it stop?
Okay. So what you're asking is, what's the cap on the whole program?
So if I was a
It's
large
75.
corporation like Amazon, and I gave $75 million check January 1st at 12:01 a.m., then I would get the whole tax credit and nobody else would be able to apply?
Yeah, you would. I don't know if they would do that, but
Yeah.
but you're right. Up to 75 million can be donated to this.
Okay.
And so it could be just a few big corporations. It could be just a few big individuals, like, you know, some
How
that we're
long
talking
do you
about.
think that will last, that limitation?
The 75 million?
Yes.
Well, they started out in 2021 at
Right.
50 million. And prior to that, they were talking 25 million. So they keep bringing it up. And now 727 brought it to 75 million. So I think they'll just keep raising the number because nobody's fussed about it.
They'll keep raising that number until there's no one else, there's no public schools left. It'll all be privatized.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So we got the program. Oh, and it's at $75 million. Now it was at $50 million with the scholarship program. They're going to be able to get 100% of the tax credit back to them when they
Right.
donate. There is a $50 million cap, so whenever that's reached, it's done. So if it's reached in February, nobody else can donate to it after that.
Right.
But further on, what else do we need to look at?
Well, you know, on the tax credit, we just need to understand that they're not paying for it. The taxpayer is. This is coming out of our tax dollars. So
everybody
we're
else-
paying for it.
Everybody else is covering the wealthy people donating to these schools.
It is. And this is kind of an aside, but it is interesting that this happened. At the same time this bill was being passed, Congress had a 2-year moratorium on in the tax code, the federal tax code, that when if you donated your marketable securities, which are easily valued, right?
Yeah.
That when you do that, you can take a deduction on your federal income taxes for the amount of the value of that stock. But you would have to, usually, you would have to claim the gain on it before you take the deduction. So it kind of washes. The deduction isn't as big because you have to claim the gain first, the capital gain. So for 2 years during this period that the program was passed, this statute was passed in 2021, they didn't have to report the gain on their stock. So the tech companies, this really benefited them, and that's kind of significant. I think the tech companies might be part of funding this thing.
Pushing it through.
Right, but they have huge capital gains in their stock because they're not, they don't have big manufacturing and big equipment and all that. So they have huge gains. So for them, it was a way that they could cash in their stock and not have to report the gain and also get the deduction, a bigger deduction. And a lot of people don't know this, but most donations, political donations, come from capital gains. Okay, so
That's interesting.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It kind of tells you who's behind this and why this was set to go.
Yeah, that's why Facebook funded so much of the last election.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, so on these contributions, they're unlimited up to the cap, of course, the 50 and now 70 million. And you have to be a taxpayer that's subject to income tax in Missouri.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just going through this. We're looking at 135.713 next. And this talks about how it's 100% deductible. And it talks about the 50 million cap in 2021. Okay, so the money is allocated. The treasurer allocates how much. There's education assistance associations, and their purpose is to put the student with the school, and they also receive the donations. They receive the money, not the state treasurer.
They're like a middleman.
They are a middleman. I think of them as a broker, kind of like realtors or something like that. So they're actually receiving the money from the person or company that donates it. And the state treasurer's only job is that he allocates to there's six educational assistance associations, and I'll just call them EAOs right now. The state treasurer allocates how much each EAO has to allocate to donors.
And right now there's just 6 of them.
There's just 6.
Okay.
And that could be a whole other podcast for you guys.
Yeah, do we know who the 6 are?
I do have that, and I can give that to you later. And I think that's a whole nother story in itself that you'd be real interested in.
I think so too.
Yeah. So anyway, the state treasurer, I just really want to emphasize this, does not receive the money from these donations. It never touches the treasurer's office at all. It's received by the EAOs.
It's all privatized.
Right, and those are private organizations. They're 501c3 organizations.
Receiving public, they're receiving
The donations
donations
that get a credit.
that get the tax credit.
Right.
That we cover
But
as
we're
public.
covering it. Yeah.
Right. So the reason I point out to this section is it talks about, you got to read carefully, and you've got to read the language, how this thing is working. So I've just highlighted places where it shows that. Okay, then we go to 135.714 that talks about the duties of the EAO, the private organizations, and the duties of the state treasurer. And if you look down at number 3, the state treasurer provides, the EAO provides a receipt to the donors, and they need that receipt in order to file their tax return to claim the credit.
Yeah.
But the treasurer does not give those receipts. The treasurer does not receive the receipts. The treasurer provides the EAO with a approved receipt. So they're just doing the form. This is the form you need to use to give to your donor to get so that they can get the receipt, the credit.
So how do you protect against fraud?
Good question.
How do you protect that someone actually donated, and how do you know that the $75 million was met and it wasn't exceeded? Who's keeping track of the fact that we hit $75 million and then we're stopping? What if someone goes to $80 million? I mean,
well, I don't think they'd be able to claim $80 million against their taxes because the revenue department would catch that.
Like, say there's like 300 people that donate, but the total amount gets up to $80 million because there's all these different receipts. How do you protect against fraud that someone says I donated more than I actually did? The EAOs are trying to get more.
Well, they would get in trouble for that. There is a provision here that the treasurer, if he sees that there's fraud, and that would be a fraud. But I think the way they work it is that the treasurer says, okay, there's 6 of you, we have 50 million, you get X million dollars. Each one of you gets this. And then it says in here, if one of them doesn't use all of their credit, that he'll reallocate it. The treasurer reallocates it to the other. So I think the plan is to use the 50 million, now 75 million.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a scam in that part of it. I don't think it's set up for that. I think to me the real scam is that the money's not going straight to the kids like we think it is. It's going into a fund.
Well, and then they can skim. So the best solution for them is to do it in blocks of $250,000 or less, because then they can take 10%. Once it goes above $250,000, it goes to 8%, then 3%, depending on the amount. Mm-hmm. So they want to make sure that they spread it thin so that they can get good 10% amounts for every donation they give and pass on to the schools, because that increases what they get for their administrative costs administrative and marketing cost.
Which also, when you look at all these organizations that are going to probably be involved in it, they're all going to take turns and get their little tax credits, and you know.
But if those are nonprofits, you have to be a taxpayer, and so nonprofits aren't donating to this. It's going to be, these are people that pay taxes.
But they all have little arms that are attached, you know.
Although their board members might be able to donate as individuals or their corporations that they own. So there's a benefit to, there's an incestuous benefit to them to create this cycle of donation and tax credit for themselves.
Right. And to my way of thinking, the obvious ones that are donors that also get the credits are going to be those that benefit from this. And those that benefit are the ones that provide curriculum and charter schools. And, there's, I don't know if people know about this, but there's companies that do public school management companies. And Michael Milken's big in that. He's big. I think he's the number one provider of charter schools and the public school management company. So,
and Michael Milken was convicted in the 80s for junk bonds, and he's also responsible in Latin America for the satellite company going in and doing some very invasive practices against the people there that are violating basic civil rights and going into municipalities and to the governments. You had a whole article about the carbon credits, and I'll share links with the Substack article so people can do research on their own. But Michael Milken is not a hero of the people.
No, not at all. He's also involved in natural asset companies.
Yeah,
they've been trying to sneak that in.
Yeah, I've covered that in a previous article.
And then there's something else that's kind of under the radar with defined benefit plans.
I haven't heard of that before.
Okay, the retirement plans went from being defined benefit to defined contribution. And defined benefit means when you retire, this is how much you're going to get. Whereas defined contribution is this is how much we're going to put in every year. So defined benefit plans, he and others in his group, Drexel Burnham, the whole fraudulent group, they're taking those defined benefit plans, they're buying them from the companies, like, let's just take an oil company like Exxon or Conoco or, somebody like that their employees are under defined benefit. They're buying it and they're taking the assets. Those pension plans have assets, actual stocks, bonds, whatever. They're taking those assets and they're substituting an IOU or an annuity, an insurance annuity, and those insurance companies are formed in the Bahamas and they're formed by these guys. So, these people stand to lose everything.
It sounds a little bit like Social Security.
Well, yeah. It sounds like the fraud that he was doing with junk bonds.
Yeah.
So I do believe he's probably a big player in all this because he's in education.
There's money to be made in doing this, because if you can get the government to constantly provide you a check to feed the kids, to educate the kids, to clothe the kids, to take care of the kids from cradle to grave almost, chip the kids. There's a lot of things about chipping people, but this would be a social credit system that's privatized. The libertarians are, oh my gosh, the libertarians. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but the libertarians are some of the people pushing for this. So.
Yeah, I think they're buying into the choice thing, as many do. And, these guys, when you talk about privatizing education, they want to run school like it's a business. Yeah. And we understand our kids as little human beings that are growing and changing, and they understand them as employees, and I think there's a lot of pressure put on kids right now to be little adults, and that they push and beyond their abilities. A lot of times, a lot of paper writing, and it's not good.
Do you think that, so when you look at DESE scores and you look at how children's scores in general, academic scores have cratered, they can't even turn out kids who are really reading and writing. This could that be one reason why DESE is so big on getting their big failure into the private sphere so that it doesn't get it, you know what I mean? It kind of goes away, their big failure.
Well, they don't want homeschoolers to look at, because statistically, homeschoolers, I think I did an article about this, but 21 points higher. I think it's 15 to 25 points higher, but in that range, higher on ACT scores, SAT scores. So they're doing much better than the DESE educated student. And so there's that, but in SB 727, they added requirements that force homeschool parents to put their kids in the seat rather than letting them learn organically.
Right. They are requiring 400 out of 600 hours be in the home being educated. And that is ridiculous because I homeschooled my kids. We were never home. Yeah. I mean, we did 1 or 2 hours at home, and then we were off doing all kinds of stuff for most of the day.
Because most of school is moving the kids around, whereas when they're home, one-on-one teaching, they can get it done.
Yeah, and I was a public school teacher. I taught special ed, and I taught cross-cat and functional skills. And when part of the problem with what education does is we set them in a desk, and we require them to sit still and to be good little people and not move around and not be active. And that type of learning didn't work for my kids, and I didn't enforce it, but that's what they wanted everyone to do. And so it's a failure of the system. So they want everybody failing.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's intentional to dumb down the kids, and it's been going on for generations.
Yes.
Thinking back, I can see it too but it's really bad now. And, I did give you an article about Rex Sinkfeld.
You did.
Where it talks about the goal is to make things really uncomfortable for the parents with public education, all these weird rules. And of course, I'm sure Mary will get into that more.
Yeah,
that's
I'd like
another
to have
whole
a talk
thing
with Mary and have an interview like we're having now.
Yeah,
So.
but I do think it's intentional. I think this program, the scholarship program, even though it's just a small part of the school budget, it's opening the door, and they're creating an endowment that's going to keep growing. So the funding is actually coming. A lot of funding is going to be coming through the scholarship program as it accumulates.
So do you want to talk to us about the differences between the account and the fund?
Yeah, let's go on forward. So I want to show you some of the reasons why that tell me that there is a separate fund that's being put into a private organization somewhere. So back to section 135.714, the EAO is supposed to ensure that grants are distributed to scholarship accounts. Okay, so the scholarship accounts are for the kids. And if you go back to the first page, 712, number 6 says a scholarship account is a savings account. Now, isn't that interesting? If the money goes in for those kids and then goes back out, it shouldn't be a savings account. Yeah. It's just an in and out account. It would be like a checking account, right? But it wouldn't be an investment account. Right there in the definitions, that's a clue. So let's go back to 714.
Are they acting like a bank?
Who knows? It would be very interesting to know. Okay, so if you look at 135.714, paragraph 5, A and B, the EAO is to ensure that 100% of its revenues from interest or investments is spent on scholarship accounts, and at least 90% of its revenues from qualifying contributions is spent on scholarship accounts. Okay, you think of tax revenues as receipts, right? Yeah. And so they're playing with words here. That phrase, revenues from, could mean a lot of things. It could mean earnings on. And that's what I think is happening when you take everything all together. So 100% of the earnings on or earnings from interest or investments, 90% of earnings from contributions is what the EAO has to spend on these kids. Okay, so they're getting a fee based on the 50, let's say 75 million, because that's what it is now. They're getting their up to 10% fee on the 75 million coming from us.
Yeah.
To be the in-between guy. That's like their commission, basically. Putting this kid and the donor and the money as together in the schools as a broker.
Yeah.
So, but there's not a whole lot they're really doing. So anyway, that's your first big clue right there, is that paragraph about 100% of revenues from and 90% of revenues from. I believe that's earnings. I think that means earnings.
So they'll be able to keep some of the money that they're earning from interest and.
Well, the EAOs aren't keeping it because further on, the statute says that the EAOs. I'll get to that too.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's kind of hard because the statute jumps around, and that's part of the trick of it. I think it jumps around to where you're going, wait a minute, what did it say where? But so I put arrows on these so you can go back to it. So the EAO does receive the money, but let's go further in. Okay, to it'd be 135.714 paragraph. You gotta get used to reading how they number statutes. Paragraph 4. Yeah, I put an arrow to it.
Okay.
Okay, so it says an educational organization may contract with private financial management firms to manage scholarship accounts with the supervision of the state treasurer. Okay, so let's unpack that.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. So it says scholarship accounts. So that means the money that's supposed to be going to the kids, that's the scholarship accounts. And so we already know that the EAO receives the money from the donor. So this paragraph says they can contract with a private financial management firm to take that money. That's where they're putting the money. So we could be talking Vanguard, we could be talking BlackRock. I'm thinking mutual fund, but it could be a big bank. I mean,
so they're not even housing the money. All they're doing is saying, this group of people we want to get the money to.
Mm-hmm.
Then once they say we decide who gets the money, we're going to take 10% of that. And then they're going to say, hey, you who are housing the money, you need to write the check out to school A over here, or homeschool person B. And so that's all they're doing.
That's all they're doing. They're not taking the money and putting it into an account that they control or manage, and they're not paying the money out to the kids either. They're putting it with this private financial management firm. See, I think that word financial is important too. And I'm going to go back just real quickly. Definitions in a statute are really important. So when they say the word that 100% of revenues from, 90% of revenues from should be in the definitions. When you look at the Internal Revenue Code, the federal one, income is defined right up front. This is what income is, income means. And that's how tax laws are written. And so when you put words into these, revenues from should be defined, and they didn't. And they didn't do it because they don't want us to know.
So they're loosely keeping this word nebulous because they don't want us to have a really clear idea of their plan on how they plan on what they're going to do with the money.
We're not supposed to know that there's a little endowment being created by this money that's going in $75 million every single year. So we're not supposed to know that.
And then $100 million next year and $125 million.
If they keep raising it, yeah. So here on this one where they say that the EAOs can put this money with a private financial management firm, that term should be defined. What are we talking about? Are we, how big is this firm? Is it a bookkeeping firm, or is it a stock brokerage? Is it a mutual fund? Who are we talking? Is it a bank? But private financial management firm, a firm that just that takes the money in and writes the checks out to the schools for the benefit of the kids, a bookkeeping function, that's pretty nothing. They're not a financial management firm. So
if we're looking at that's a huge problem. Mm-hmm. But what does it mean with the supervision of the state treasurer?
Okay.
They're just acting like the middleman, aren't they?
The treasurer,
Yes.
it gives them cover, because when they say the supervision of the state treasurer, all that really means is they could say, we're going to put this money with BlackRock, and the treasurer says, okay, that's a good firm, you know.
Okay. All right. So it's a cover.
It is a cover, but the legislature also falls down on the job, because for $75 million to go to some financial management firm, I mean, do you want your money going to a little bank? Do you want your money going to a big bank? Do you want it going to an honest one? You know, there should be more here saying who exactly. 'Cause, you know, in the past when like, let's take bonds that cities issue, there's always requirements that the bank have a certain size and a certain equity, and you know, just this nebulous private financial management firm. I mean, who is it?
What if it's just an individual's private financial firm, an individual who has helped make sure all this gets passed? I mean, it could be that simple, because it's so, again, nebulous.
It is. I mean, considering who's behind this and the skill of the lawyers that did this and everything.
The Wall Street people who made money, who are behind this in Missouri.
Or maybe somebody out of D.C.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know specifics, but I just know from reading this that this is pretty clever. So, you know, it could be like some of the people involved in this. Rex Sinkfeld very much wants privatized schools, and he's index funds. I don't know if he still manages them, but maybe he's got a fund.
I think he's found a way to make a lot more money than he ever did on Wall Street. I'm sorry. I mean, this is guaranteed income for life kind of thing.
From the taxpayer.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and let's talk about fees just real quickly on this too, because so we know that the EAOs get up to 10% of the annual donations. We'll call them donations. But if you go to this one, section 166.700, this is also part of the scholarship program, and it has more definitions and things. There's just one thing here I really want to point out, is that on the second page, it'd be 166.700, no, it's 166.705, paragraph 4. It says the money's deposited in the Qualified Students Missouri Empowerment Scholarship account. So that's the account for the kids. Account again. And then turn the page, subparagraph 8 talks about how these monies are used, what they can be used for. Fees for management of the Missouri Empowerment Scholarship account by firms selected by the EAO. So the fees from whoever this money is being deposited with is used. It's taken out of the students'
that account and given to them.
It's given to them
to manage the accounts, right? Oh my goodness.
Well, to invest it, I think.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this makes me think it's a mutual fund or something like that, where they get, you know, they take the fee out before they give you your interest or your dividend. So I could be wrong as to what kind of firm it is, but that's what I think.
They knew exactly what firm it was, because if the way you're talking about it, they know what fees need to be paid. They know exactly. They're just refusing to define it. They have all of this set up behind the scenes already. They have the system and the structure already in place. Mm-hmm. All they needed to do was get the law passed.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason I can tell you that the whole thing was set up before, as far as going through the legislature, because they wouldn't allow amendments. There were people in the legislature that wanted to do amendments. They would not allow it. And they couldn't allow it because this is pretty intricate what they've set up. And they had to cross their T's and dot their I's to get it to comply with federal tax laws so that people get their credits and their deductions. So, you know, they couldn't risk the ordinary people, which is us, you know, coming in with amendments.
I'm sitting here looking under that paragraph under B, where they're talking 5B, tuition at a private school located outside of the state of Missouri. They're actually
Funding state
funding
schools outside of Missouri.
schools outside of Missouri.
I missed that one. Which one is that?
Right there.
Towards the
Oh,
bottom.
number B,
Yes.
5B. Wow. Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, this I know this is really deep, going through tax code, and it's not the normal kind of stuff you want to do for an interview because you want to hype everything up and be very exciting.
It is very
It is exciting because this really gets to the point that this bill that they passed, everybody talked about how conservative it was, how constitutional it was. Parsons signed it, and everybody who put this through has put through it's fascist.
Absolutely.
This is probably one of the most fascist things I've seen so far, and it is designed to take over our public education and take over our homeschool families, take over our private schools, our charter schools, and the people who are applauding it in our communities, in our state, thinking this is what's going to make our government better and our schools better and our homes better.
So they're taking what public government has failed at, which is education. I mean, it's obvious it's imploding. It's an absolute failure at this point.
Yeah.
And they're going to put it into private corporations that frankly will just they're going to do what they're doing for business purposes,
Profit
for
only.
profit. And it's not going to be helpful to students in the long run at all.
Right. Well, I listened to your podcast, the two of you, and you made a really profound comment about education, how it was mostly administrators, more and more administrators. And we're seeing that trend, and I think it is the trend of privatization. Like in medicine, we see hospital administrators, it's bean counters, running the business by numbers. And take Boeing, the engineers are to run the company is very important because we see all these problems with the plane.
Are people accidentally dying who are getting ready to give testimony?
Right.
Yeah.
And the planes aren't safe anymore. They're not being safely made, and the engineers know that. But who's running the company? The MBAs, the administrators, who all it is to them is the numbers. And Michael Milken and his group, these people connected with him, that's how they are too. This isn't about doing a good job. This is about how do we make money off of, off the kids, off of this, off of that.
Well, they're parasites. They're just parasites is what they are, and they're milking us.
They are.
And they're using the children. And
I'm actually going to write an article about parasites
Really?
today. So I have
How
an article set
appropriate.
up about parasites. And then this is so disturbing.
It's so evil. It's
It
so
is.
deeply evil, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. I'm interviewing someone. He's an author. He wrote a book about Ukraine and the war that's getting set up. I'm going to read it hopefully this weekend. But and then I'll interview him. But he was talking about the generals in D.C. And he said that at World War II, we had 500% less generals during World War II than we do now. Those generals have completely ruined the army because there's so many of them. And it's the administrators who are causing the problems.
Yes, their training is so different from, like, the teachers are the doers, the engineers are the doers, the people with the training to get the thing done right. Well, to go back to this, and as you can tell, there's a lot to unpack in these, but I'm trying to focus on just where did they create this fund.
Sure.
So, we're talking about fund, which is this kid's or account. The scholarship account is what the kids get. And then there's this thing about the fund, and this just cracks me up. In, where is it? Okay, go to, if this is near the end of the bill, section 135.716, paragraph 6. and I've got an arrow to it. There is hereby created in the state treasury the Missouri Empowerment Scholarship Accounts Fund. Okay? So they go through the whole statute talking about the scholarship accounts, but now we're creating the accounts fund. Okay, so what is this? This consists of monies collected under this section. This section isn't the whole bill.
Oh,
it's
okay.
just this section is 135.716. Okay? So what does this fund do? Okay, this fund is collected. The treasurer is a custodian of the fund. Okay, so what's in the fund? Right here, paragraph 7. 2% of the qualifying contributions, those are the donations, right, received by the EAO are then deposited to this fund. And here in paragraph 7, they put it in smaller case letters, Empowerment Scholarship Accounts Fund, but it is the fund. Okay, to be used by the state treasurer for marketing and administration costs.
So 2% goes
To the treasurer.
to the treasurer, the state treasurer.
But people reading this the first time around, they're going to think this scholarship account fund, that's the money, right?
That's
That's
a real
all the money
money.
going to the treasurer. It's not. It's 2% of the cash and the marketable securities. Okay, so on the page before,
Is everybody skimming from this? I mean, it seems like everybody's getting a chance to skim
well,
from
it
this.
seems like the treasurer gets a pretty good chunk.
Yeah.
Okay, in the prior section, 135.715, okay, so 716 is where they create the fund, but the fund is only for the treasurer. Okay, 0.715 says, paragraph 4, and I've put an arrow there with 4%.
Notwithstanding.
Okay, notwithstanding, well, we don't need to read that because that just confuses you.
Oh, that just caught me up to where I
Yeah.
needed to be.
Notwithstanding that in the next paragraph, it tells you that the treasurer only gets 2%. This one says the treasurer gets 4% of the total qualifying contributions to the EAOs. And it's to be used by the treasurer for marketing and administrative costs.
Do they get 4% at the top and then 2% at the back end?
No, what it is they're getting they're
One's
There's
for
different-
the account and one's for the fund.
No, it's more than that. So remember, the contributions are cash, stocks, bonds, and marketable securities. So the treasurer gets 2% of the cash and the marketable securities, the stocks and bonds, and 4% of just the cash that gets contributed.
Okay.
So they probably,
They're getting 4% of marketable bonds and stocks and things like that. But if anybody donates cash, they get 2% of the
So,
well,
so are you saying that they're getting money both off the interest part of the fund and then
no,
off of the donation?
it's the donations. For some reason, they put it in two groups, and the 2% is, let's see, the 4% is just the cash component,
Okay.
but the 2% is cash plus the marketable securities.
Okay. Sorry.
So- no,
Sorry
that's
that
okay.
we're
It's
confused.
it is confusing. And why do they do that? I would guess they're thinking, well, we need to say the marketable securities because there's a little bit of, you have to value them and this and that. Although the treasurer's not doing that. The EAOs are valuing it with the approval of the state treasurer. So the state treasurer says, use the Wall Street Journal and the stock exchange values. but anyway, for some reason, maybe it was negotiated, I don't know, but they're giving them 4% on a certain category of the assets and 2% on everything. And so the treasurer gets 2 to 6%, a range
Yeah.
from the contribution. So let's say at 50 million, 2% would be 1 million. Is that right? Am I
Yeah.
thinking right?
I think
1
so.
million, and then so you go on up to 6, it'd be 1 to 6 million each year that the treasurer's office gets
They're
from
cutting.
the contributions.
They're cutting out. So out of 50 million, they're cutting out 6 million.
That's the price for them turning over public education to private.
I think so. I mean, and the treasurer only uses it for marketing and administrative costs. But they have a website.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the EAOs are doing the work of receiving and giving the receipts.
And then there's the private companies, the private marketing companies.
The investment, the financial management companies.
Financial companies.
So they're handling the investment of the contributions.
And so they're getting a portion of it. So everybody's getting a portion of it. So by the time you get the 50 million back to the students, how much is really getting to the students?
Well, and it's only earnings on it.
Yeah.
So it's the earnings on the contributions. So they're not getting 50 million. There's no way they're spending 50 million each year on
or
those
75
kids.
million.
Or 75 million.
And plus they have limited who can receive them based on all their criteria.
So you got a hierarchy.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and when this thing first came out, part of what sold it to parents is that it was limited to just the kids with IEPs. They were first to get the money. And then second was kids that were up to 200% of the free and reduced price lunches.
Yeah.
And, I've always felt that the IEP kids, depending on how severe their learning disability is, private schools can't usually handle them or, offer services.
Well, and this, with my experience, I worked at a school, Privatizes Preparatory Academy, and they wanted to do Medicaid services for the students with disabilities. And so I have to be careful how I say this, but I observed what looked like Medicaid fraud when they were asking us to bill for hours for services for the students when they weren't actually receiving services. So I reported them to Medicaid, because of the fraud I observed, or the alleged fraud I observed. They're in Florida now being prosecuted by other people because they ran away. Because they're cowards, and I will say that because that's an opinion. And so they closed down the school, but there's a lot of money to be made. They were hoping to make money off of it and charge Medicaid for all of the students with disabilities. My son was at the school, and they were upset that I wouldn't agree to give him some kind of disabilities type service so that they could charge for him to be there. And so they were looking for every kind of way that they could earn money.
Well, and plus, because services for IEPs, English as a second language, and all that, those are more expensive than your average student who doesn't, have those kinds of issues.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. And, when this bill was first put in, the amount of the scholarship would be only $6,375 a year because they were basing it on the state adequacy target. So in 2021, that's how it was going to work. But kids with special needs, can you find a school for that kind of money? I think what do they call those? The different departments at the legislature come in with what's this thing going to cost, and one of them said they did a comparable, I think it was a Catholic school, the tuition was over $10,000. So that $6,000 isn't going to go very far with private schools. And then if you have kids that are on the poverty level, at 200% family of four, that'd be an income of $111,000. Some people could do it, but if you're really poor, you're not going to be able to pay the difference in tuition.
If, say, you're wealthy, because now the wealth income requirements are much different, you have enough money to get your kid diagnosed with ADHD, OCD, depression, or, you go to enough doctors and you do some doctor shopping and you get that. So now you have an IEP or a 504 plan. So you are now reached the top of the hierarchy. So now you want to do private education, you can at least get some of it subsidized. So you're wealthy enough to afford private education, but now you're getting a little subsidized at the same time. And so this is not a system to help the poorest of our community. This doesn't help the homeschooling mother who wants to do the best for her child, who's trying to help with curriculum. this isn't its goal.
This isn't it. And the way I see it is that as the schools continue to lose income, because these scholarships, starting in, I think it was 26, the money that's going to these scholarships starts coming out of the budgets of the school district that the student comes from. And so they're going to be losing money that way. There's things in 727 that cause shift burden to the local districts, like the unfunded teacher mandate and stuff. So, as the schools are losing money and more kids are eligible, because 727 expanded the kids that are eligible to pretty much anybody.
Yeah.
And also they increased the amount above the state adequacy target of 6,300. Certain groups get 160% of that. So,
why is DESE now on the seat? Why does DESE have a seat at the Treasurer's Board? Because if they're making this extra money, is some of the money going to DESE?
I don't think so, but I'm glad you brought that up, because that's probably the last thing I want to talk to you about on the statute, the 2021 statute that created this. Where is it? In here, when they created the fund for the state treasurer, they, paragraph or section 135.715, paragraph 3 says the state treasurer may delegate any duties he has under the Empowerment Act to the Missouri Empowerment Scholarship Accounts Board. And in this paragraph, it creates that board. So who's on the board in 2021? We have the state treasurer, the commissioner of the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development, commissioner of education, commissioner of the Office of Administration, a member appointed by the Senate, a member appointed by the House, a member appointed by the governor. Okay, DESE's not in there. Not at all, right? So who's going to get scared of this when you don't even have DESE in there? But you do have the Department of Education, basically. Okay, so 727, what did they do? They removed the Office of Administration, which to me, I'd like to learn more about them, but I think the Office of Administration has a handle on the money in all the various departments, and I think they have some oversight. They took them out and they put DESE in, and they also put in an educational assistance organization that they're going to add one of those into the board, the Scholarship Accounts Board.
Who decides which EAO is worthy of being on the board?
I have forgotten. It's in 727. It says who appoints them, and I can't remember offhand who that is. But
that seems like letting the wolf into the hen house.
I think so too. And so here you have this board, and the treasurer can delegate any duties that he has to this board. And you've got DESE on the board, and you've got an EAO on the board. So in the statute, it specifically says this board has all the powers and duties of the state treasurer. So we're talking about this money going to private schools, and DESE can put rules on them for how it's done.
So we're looking at the new ballot about abortion and trans care. And so if trans care is passed for minors, and DESE is already has put into their PE curriculum, I don't know if you've seen it, but a lot of sex ed that is about trans rights, trans medical care, that people who are children should be trans. So they're putting that into the curriculum. If they make it a constitutional right, what keeps DESE from making it a rule that homeschool parents have to now?
Well, they're going to have a hard time getting control over homeschool parents. Homeschool parents need to be really careful, because they don't know who they are. At this point, that's the best thing homeschoolers have. If they ever take the money, though, because they're trying to give credit.
The family-paced education.
Yeah, that's very concerning because I'm sure it's tempting to use that money. But the minute they do, this program didn't report to DESE, and they're keeping it it doesn't go through government at all. Whereas if you take the money on this credit for homeschoolers, it goes to DESE.
You'll be reported.
And DESE gives it to the Department of Revenue so you can get your credit. So how come it's so nebulous on the scholarship program, but DESE's in the thick of it?
They're collecting data on all these families, and with what you said, the virtual schools. And so they were trying to collect data on those parents and families through that program. And so if the family-paced education has to have some of those same requirements where they have to do some things virtually online and they're collecting data, and then we have any kind of rules requiring trans ideology being taught to our children.
SEL, DEI, all of that stuff. Those homeschool students will be forced to learn that stuff.
They might, and as a parent, you just don't want to go there.
And a prosecuting attorney, if they're radical enough, they could come in and sue the family and say, you have educational neglect, and pull the kids back into a public school.
It's not a good-looking future, so the parents, the best thing they can do is do not touch that money, because just like the private schools, they're falling under government now control. They will.
Yeah.
The minute you take that money, you start getting things put on you.
You saw that with universities, private universities that started to take the government money for student loans. They stopped being their religious affiliations. They started to drop it because they didn't need to go to the churches and say, "Hell, let's support the students." They had the government money, so they dropped a lot of their religious expectations. And you saw that they became much more secular as they took that money. You're going to see that in the private schools.
Yeah, the churches have sold out in just so many ways.
Oh boy.
That's a whole
Don't
other.
get him started.
David could go for a while.
Well, one other thing I want to point out about the 2021 law, and this is the foundation of it, and 727 builds on it. But let's talk about oversight and reporting. When they passed this in 2021, it passed narrowly then too, because the legislators, many of them didn't trust it, and I'm sure the superintendents and other associations were.
Missouri School Board Association and Missouri Association of School Administrators, and there's several. There's multiple.
Yeah, so they were calling their legislators saying, don't vote for this. And so when you look at who did vote for it, I think that tells you a lot about who they are. But anyway, initially they had, I think this was something to tempt them to do it. They said that the scholarship program wouldn't be funded unless 40% of transportation was funded. There's something with small communities where they don't get enough money from the state to pay for their busing, and so that was a temptation to the smaller school districts, and that was the first thing that 727 eliminated. That gave the legislature a little bit of control over this thing. 727 took it out.
Yeah.
So no more control from the legislature on that. The legislature, the treasurer, after 3 years, which is now this August, and I think you covered it, he is supposed to give a report, about this program. And it's basically just about, do the kids like it? Do the parents like it? There's no requirement about the money side of this. And the 5-year report, the state of the program, again, it's all about, are they graduating? How do they like it? What's their achievement? And everything's aggregated. You can tell from the statute, the reporting from the EAOs to the treasurer is not detailed as far as who's donating. It's not detailed about the kids. Everything's aggregated. So the treasurer has very little information that they can share with us.
And doesn't that actually mean then that these organizations are really not accountable for any results?
I think so.
except for their bottom line.
Except their bottom line.
Yeah, and they're not accounting to us. The financial accounting of this is very poor. The legislature cannot know what's going on. And the treasurer has limited knowledge.
Yeah, I would say that any legislator worth their salt needs to be passing bills to repeal this and not to increase it. It is a bad bill. It's not a conservative bill. It's not constitutional. It needs to go away. This is not school choice. Government should not be involved at this level. Private corporations that are trying to act like Wall Street should not be involved in our schools either. So I don't mind private schools. I think private schools can do great things, but they don't need a corporate overlord.
No,
We don't need Google-sponsored schools.
they don't. And as the public schools are failing, and this private-public partnership continues, I think who gets left in the public schools is going to be your poor children and your disabled children.
It will be Dickensian, quite frankly. It'll be like Charles Dickens.
Yeah, I mean, kids who are violent and aggressive, and the teachers are leaving in droves. My wife, she's doing artworks, and I won't say which school, but the school she's working at, they said that 18 teachers are leaving. They can't do. SPS is falling apart. Dr. Latham is not showing good leadership. She's not helping the teachers out. The violence in the schools is bad. So
It's a mess.
yeah, so public schools are failing, and we need to do something. But this is not the solution.
Well, it seems to me they're making the public schools weird places, pushing the parents out, and I think that's intentional so that people will go to this.
They want the failure. Marxism is always trying to cause a failure so that they can get to the heaven, and they think this is heaven
For somebody, but not us.
right. The elites always get heaven. The poor never get it. So.
Yeah, I don't think we're that stupid. I just think that they have the marketing, they have the influence in the legislature.
Well, they have $1 billion, $100 million foundations, and that makes a huge difference because those 501(c)(3)s are so hard to govern. You can't do any kind of sunshine request on them, and then they can give all this money to all these causes, and then everybody praises them for how great they are, how virtuous they are, and they are some of the most evil people.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So.
I'm sure they're the ones writing the reports about themselves.
Absolutely. They're marketing themselves.
Yeah.
Well, Pam, it was so great to have you. So we, again, met with Pam Buttram, and she was a fantastic interview.
Thank you.
She gave us some really good information on the tax code and what's going on at SB727, and then the Scholarship and Empowerment Fund Act that was passed in 2021.
Missouri Empowerment Scholarship Accounts Program.
Thank you for helping me out with that. And so we'll go and end the interview, and thank you again.
Thank you for making things a little bit clearer.
Well, thank you for taking the time to listen to it. I have talked to a few legislators, and it's hard getting them to sit down and because I don't really think they read the stuff.
I will.
It's obvious.
When I post this on Twitter, I will tag as many as I can.
Great.
They won't listen, but I'll tag them anyways. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,